Hi, welcome back. Well, we've got some progress here, some real progress. The entire audio stage of this radio is done. So from the audio input, which can either be the DIN input in at the back for a record player, or in this case I'm using an iPad as an MP3 player, or the audio coming from one of the radio sections, whether it's FM or AM. So from there onwards, all the way to the speakers is done. Recapped, checked, tested, and so on and so forth. Now, what I'm going to do now is, and the reason I'm a bit buzzed is because this is quite a milestone. This means that I can now move back in the circuit to the radio stages and do some of the work that I've been sort of dreading, because the tests I did originally weren't too promising on that front. Right, so let me show you. I've got some royalty-free music on the iPad. I've got that connected to the jack out, the earphone jack, and it's going into the input there, that DIN connector, which is the gramophone input. And now if I put the volume up, there we have it. And it's sounding bloody good. What I want to show you, I'm going to go through some of the functions here that pertain to the audio section. So trying to give you an idea of what this thing is doing. And I've got to tell you, it's great. It's great. I'm really, really impressed. We have here a very, very good power amplifier, if nothing else, and I'm sure there's a lot more. But I'm going to go through and show you. This is set the volume at a level that we can try to discern. It's very difficult trying to discern sound quality through YouTube, because for a start the microphones have level correction, and then there's compression, and there's everything else. So you probably will not get the idea that I'm getting, but please take my word for it. Let me show you anyway. So we've got the normal bass and treble control here. Counterclockwise is more bass. Less bass clockwise. Get it to happy medium here. If we try the treble, low treble, more treble. It's pretty obvious there, for me anyway. And those are the manual controls. Now we've got 4 preset controls: the bass, solo, intimate, and jazz. So let me start with these one at a time. Bass. Quite an obvious change for me anyway. Solo. I guess when you flip from one to the other, you get the most obvious change. Put them both off. Let's try now these two here. Intimate. These two, this certainly takes away a lot of the highs. This one brings it up and probably does something to the mid-range. All 4 of these presets are pretty discernible, which means that the switching is working, and also the components that it's using are in good condition. And obviously I've checked them, so I'm quite happy with that. Now we have one more control, which is the stereo. Now with the stereo, you probably won't get much from here because I'm using a normal single microphone, but I can certainly hear the difference. Let's see if you can as well. So what happens with the stereo is it takes the sound to or rather it reinforces the sound on the two stereo speakers on the sides. And what you then have is you have a balance control over here, which can send more to the left or more to the right. This isn't exactly precise. We'll see it later in the schematic, but it does make a difference. It's very difficult really with the speakers just inside the cabinet because you don't really notice that much difference. When you really will notice it is when you have the external speakers on. If you use external satellite speakers for the stereo, then obviously the stereo, the balance control will make a big difference. And there's also, as I'll speak in a minute, another jack DIN at the back, which is actually for an external balance control. So they took their balance quite seriously. And I would imagine that that would be more pertinent in the case of external speakers than the ones inside the cabinet. So we have the power amp is working. I'm very, very happy with it. And we certainly have a very, very good power amp here for use with any kind of external music source, whether it's an iPad, iPhone, any smartphone that has music on it, or an MP3 player, even a CD player. It's basically an auxiliary input, and in this case you can really use it as your, let's call it your main power amp if you want. So that's the power amp stage. As I said, very happy with it, and I'll give you a bit more of a description of what's happening in the back and what's happening on the inside. But basically after this stage I'm ready to move back into the radio stages, which should be quite interesting as well. All right, let's have a look at more of this of the progress so far. It's just something I want to show you here first, and that is these jacks on the back. Those 2-pin DIN connectors, that's a speaker. Now that is actually the main speaker. So this one here takes the sound from the push-pull amp and gives you the main speaker output. And what this has got inside is a little switch. So when you plug in a DIN connector, it actually cuts out the internal speakers and passes the sound on to the external speaker. That's extremely important. You never want to run one of these things without one speaker connected at least. And so that's what happens here. You never connect a tube amp or tube radio with a tube amp with no speaker. So when you connect a speaker in here, it disconnects the externals. These two here, this one is actually the audio input, the gramophone input that I've been using with that plug that I showed you in the last video. It's a 5-pin DIN plug. It uses the ground and then left and right. The other two aren't used. This one here, this is actually a balance control. And I found that quite unusual, but what it is actually a control. You would have a wired balance control. It's simply a potentiometer with I believe there's an isolation cap. So you go from one end to the other with the outsides of the potentiometer. The wiper then goes out into a electrolytic capacitor, about 10 microfarads, and back in here. So what you're doing here is you're actually changing the balance from left to right. And I presume this would be very useful if you had the external speakers operating. These guys here, these two here, are the two external stereo speakers, so left and right. So again, it's got a switch inside that cuts out the internal speaker when you plug it in, left and right. And then that guy over there is a tape recorder connector, which you can connect in and tape while you're playing something. And I believe there's an input as well. So that can be used for that purpose. So that explains a little bit of what these back sockets are. They do get a bit confusing. You see the back of the set actually has the indicators, but that's what they're for. Now going on to the inside, you can see that I've done quite a bit of recapping. All those caps that were on the signal path, those little orange ones and green and blue and all sorts of crap that they had in there, have been swapped out. The soldering, obviously, I've made sure that it's a great improvement because they were pretty abysmal. These caps are sort of a medium quality. They're good quality for this sort of radio. You're not looking at high-end hi-fi here. You don't expect it. But the important thing is to get a sound that you enjoy. You can see there's still quite a lot of those other orange caps. There's one old paper cap over there which still needs looking. That's in the radio circuit. A few more of those caps that I swapped out here. These are part of the audio stage. So that completes the audio amplifier section of the radio. Now, anyone who's been watching my videos for any length of time will know that the cosmetic work is not exactly my favorite job. So what I try to do is, in between some of the, let's call them interesting stuff, I try to do bits and pieces of the cosmetics. And what I've done here is actually the complete front part of the radio. So, as you can see, knobs have been duly polished, faceplate cleaned up. It cleaned up very, very well, actually. Some of the knobs, as I've mentioned, that one down there has burn marks on the underside, but you can't do anything about that, unfortunately. But this has all been cleaned up, and the result is quite nice. Now, this cleanup job extends to one other aspect which I really dreaded, and that is the dial cords. Now, the FM dial cord was the wrong way around. When you rotated this clockwise, this thing went left. That's been corrected. It was actually on the wrong pulleys, and the AM capacitor was completely unconnected. So I had no schematics, no drawings for that, so I had to figure it out, and I got to tell you, it's a pain in the ass. I really don't enjoy this, but it's done, and it's working very well. So the dial cords are in, the tuning is working, or rather the pointers are moving with the tuning capacitor. And another thing I did is that backplate there that you see, that white or cream backplate, that was completely rusted up. So I removed it, and it's actually quite easy to remove. It's just 2 screws on the bottom side. You take off those lamps, and obviously you do all this with the faceplate and the knobs out of there, otherwise you can't get it done. But I removed it, sanded it down, and then sprayed it. I sprayed the back, the metallic grey like it was before, and the white or the cream on the front. And so this thing is looking as good as new, and you can see when you look in here now, you get a nice clear view through the dial. The dials have been given a fresh touch-up of red paint as well, so they're both more visible. And I'm happy. That part is done. You know, the tone knobs have been cleaned and lubricated, as have all the pulleys and all the moving parts on this thing. So by doing this in bits and pieces, it makes it easier to get the whole job done. Because when you get to the end, you've got a lot of the grind work, the part that I don't enjoy, is already done. Obviously, you know, we still have the whole cabinet to work on, but I need this cabinet here when I test the radio, because I want to use, you know, that speaker connector there. Makes it easier. You just plug it in here. And so I won't do the cabinet just yet, but I now have one of the most difficult parts done. The other thing is you have to be incredibly careful. As you can see, the guy before me, or someone before me, had cracked off part of the glass, And this can happen so easily when you take the glass faceplate out. All you need to do is just touch it the wrong way and it cracks. So it's a good thing to get it out, cleaned, and put it back in where at least it's properly supported and safer. There have also been a few touch-ups. You can see that it looks a lot more obvious here than on camera than it does in fact. A lot of the marks on the back of this thing that were visible were touched up with I do a mixture of brown and black paint and then just painted from the back. There were quite a few visible, but now they're properly camouflaged. Unless you're looking for them, you won't see them. So yeah, so that part is done, and that's a relief. Let's have a look at the schematic and I'll show you where I've got to so far. So when you look at this, it's starting to look green. A lot of it's been done, as you can see, and most of it obviously on this right hand half, which is the audio stage. Now the audio comes in over here where you select between one of the outside sources, you know, whether you're using whether you're trying to get FM or AM. That comes in through here, and this is where the actual audio stage starts. It comes in here and it starts there. Now everything up to here is mono, and then you start going into stereo territory. Now let me show you where this all starts happening. This is the audio socket. That there is the audio input socket. That's the balance control. That's the tape. So everything comes in here, and it's basically the same left and right channel. So if you go in here, you've got a resistor to ground reference. There's that replaced cap, the one that was pretty atrocious. Then it goes into one half of the ECC83 12AX7. Comes out. Now you see it coming out here, down here, and it meets one coming down here. That goes to the power supply, so that's your anode. That there is your anode resistors. Your signal comes out there, then you start going into selectors. So you're going to be selecting between gramophone, tape, or one of the radio channels, so AM or FM. And then everything moves on to this volume control. That's one half of that dual volume control. As usual, it has some of those complex tape-offs, you know, cut-offs halfway through and partway through, so you get some tonal balance there and tone shaping. Some of the switching here, the jazz, the jazz, bass, all that happens at this stage of the game. But your volume control, once you get out of your volume control, you go in here and you're into the first ECL86 triode. Now the ECL86 is a triode and a pentode in one. So this does preamplification, and then the corresponding pentode inside the ECL86 does the power amplification. So there's a preamp stage here, and then you go into the power amp stage, and there are a few other things like this is the I believe this one is the treble control and so on. So by the time you get to here, you're into your power amp stage, single-ended, and that's your output transformer over there, and it goes out to the speakers and also to that speaker connector. And you can see here where this little hand is, that's the disconnect point. When you plug in a external speaker, it disconnects the speaker that you have inside, which is that line over there. So that happens exactly the same on the other channel at the bottom here, so I won't go through that. Then what happens is, at this point here, this signal is taken off there and it goes to join the other signal from the other side, and this forms your central amplification stage, your push-pull amplification stage. And there's actually they mix in together and you're getting a mono signal. And then what you've also got is you've got these two triodes of those two power tubes creating a phase inversion so that you can drive the push-pull stage, and then you've got your two push-pull power stages there with the respective transformer. So as you can see, most of this is painted in. Some of it at the end I just checked, and I forgot to paint it in here, but it's all been checked. Some of these are pretty difficult to get to because they're hidden away behind some of the switches, especially this section here. There's a lot of switch to switch connectors. Those are pretty difficult to get, and it's a question of being methodical about it. You just follow through, and generally it works okay. That pot over there is a balance control. That one there is a balance control, and what it's doing, it's taking your left signal, goes there to that side of the pot, your right signal goes there to that side of the pot, and your center, your wiper, goes to ground. So as you move this left or right, it shorts out effectively part of the signal, drops the level of the signal for that side. Now this only happens after you've taken that signal off to the mono channel. So you're basically doing a balance of your stereo speakers. And also the balance is not to zero. You don't actually short this to ground. There's still a 33K resistor there. So even when this is all the way to the right or all the way to the left, you're not actually shorting the signal there. You've still got a bit of signal coming through into that power tube. So I think this gives you an idea. Now I've obviously simplified this a lot, and believe me, there's very little simple about this radio. It's very well thought of. Everything is there for a reason. Sometimes it's difficult to know what it is until you really sit down and look at everything specifically and try and follow the logic of the signal path through there. But it's all there and it works. Hey, it works. I mean, you can't argue with that. We've got the signal coming in. I've actually done some sine wave inputs, 1 kilohertz sine wave inputs in here, and seen them or heard them coming out, tried the stereo. It works. It's a bit boring to sit and listen to 1 kilohertz tones. That's why I decided to try that music. The point is that stage is done. So even if our radio is not too sensitive or too clear or whatever, I haven't even looked at that too much, we have a very, very good power amplifier which you can use with your favorite MP3 music source, or whether it's your iPhone, your iPad, you know, iPod, whatever you want to use. You now have a fantastic tube amplifier here, and it is very good. It's very, very low noise. You know, you put this thing loud and then you hit pause on your music player, so you should get nothing, and you really almost get nothing. You know, you might hear a little bit of a hiss from the speakers, but it is very, very quiet. So I'm extremely happy with this. I'm really, really happy with this. And now it's time to move on and go to the radio, which I've been dreading, quite honestly, because I wasn't too thrilled with the result that I got when I tested it initially. I suppose getting something is something. We do have reception, which is a good start. But yeah, well, I'll report back when I have some more information, and hopefully it'll be good news. Well, see you soon.